Welcome to Stop My Crisis. I'm your host, Vivian Gaspar. As many of you know, I've spent the last 8 years helping people and navigating them through homes in crisis, whether that's when to sell their home or why, or navigating them through a foreclosure process. And I could tell you, having sat in hundreds of families' homes in the last 8 years, that unfortunately one of the leading causes of needing to leave the family home, unfortunately, we all understand, is divorce. I am so fortunate to have with me today a lady who's extraordinarily experienced in and has helped many, many thousands of people navigate their ways through this aspect of challenge. My guest here today, Alena Chapman, is a best-selling author, speaker, and has mentored thousands through divorce, and is also a divorced mom of 3. And she says there's a better way. Thank you, Alena.
Hello, Vivian. I am so honored to be here. Justin Timberlake, he says, my parents divorced when I was 3. I am honestly and humbly finding out that I have a lot of issues with that. Kids grow up with what we think are scars of divorce, but it's how we handle the divorce. It's how we as the parents handle the divorce that helps the children either be very scarred or to grow up happy and successful and happy.
I've heard, having been divorced myself, that children will mirror what they see as our own reactions.
Yes.
So if we put on the brave face instead of, and it could be the euphemism of hiding under the covers and sleeping 14 hours a day, or maybe you just get so absorbed that you want to watch a lot of TV shows because you're in that imaginary world. There's many different ways to get lost in your own despair instead of teaching your children how to better cope by leading. So I know you told me there's a few tricks that you could share with our audience on how our children can feel more secure in the fact that their parents are getting divorced, but their world is not going to end.
Yes. Okay.
What are those tips?
I got it. When you are in a good place, when you can get yourself in a halfway decent place, then you have got to show your children that it's going to be okay, that mommy and daddy love them, but that they're going to be fine. And that kids worry about financial. They do. They like their activities. They like where they're going to school. They like their friends. They like feeling secure. So you also have to let them know financially you'll be okay. These are some things that I say to do. First of all, when I was going through my divorce, and mine was 5.5 years long, so I do know how hard divorce can be. But first of all, I'd have a family meeting. Every week we would have a family meeting.
Really? A weekly family meeting?
A weekly family meeting.
Did you make it part of your protocol?
Yeah, I did. But it was
That's
fun.
one I never thought of.
I would make popcorn. It would be fun. We would talk about things that were happening at school.
Oh.
We would talk about things that, whatever, their friends, whatever they wanted to bring up. But then I'd also bring up things about decisions that we had to make as a family in either if it was even moving, or if it was maybe cutting back here, but maybe being able to spend here. But whatever I did in those family meetings, I wanted to be supportive, I wanted to show love, and I wanted to show that it's going to be okay. Those were the 3 objectives every family meeting.
I've heard so many times, because I do have children myself of varying ages, how do you choose what to deliver to your family, your children, in an age-sensitive area? For example, we're talking right now in the aspect of having to leave a family home. So obviously stress and of course financial stress is brought on by divorce. I mean, seldom can one parent maintain a certain socioeconomic level when they're getting divorced, right? Right. So if they have to leave a certain neighborhood, because it's cheaper in another neighborhood, and that certainly usually affects the children's schooling, what can you say to 2 children? Do you sit down and speak with them differently? So let's say one child's a young teenager, 13, 14, 15, I don't know if there's a difference, and another one's maybe 7, 8, 9. Do you split them apart and say things differently, or do you frame it so that they're together, since it's a family meeting, and gear it toward a younger audience, and then maybe take the older one aside and give them a little bit more information? What's the better way to handle that?
The older the child is, they may not like it, but they'll also understand the logistics of, we can't afford to stay here. So if you have a child that's 13, 14, 15, definitely 15 understands. But when you have a child who is 6, 7, and 8, and this has been their school in this world, then it's a little bit of, I did it a little bit differently. The older children, I would tell. My older child, who was, he was 14, and I was able to tell him, you know, we're going to have to move. This home has brought us a lot of pain in some ways, and not just me, but we went through a lot there. And also, it wasn't where we needed to be. If it was financial, I'd tell him that, but it just was where we needed to be. We couldn't be there. So what we did then was he helped me to talk to the 7-year-old.
So you enrolled the older one.
I did.
On how to speak with the younger one.
Yeah.
So did you pull him aside
I
first?
Did. I told
talk
him
to him
first.
And then tell you, we have to tell your brother?
Now, let's go ahead and what do you think we just go out and start looking at houses?
Oh.
And so we made it a game. And my older son was able to make it more of a game for my younger ones too.
Oh, that's very useful.
So everybody got excited and got into the car with the dog and everything else. And we went and just picked out houses. We didn't go in.
Oh.
We were just picking out, oh, I like that one. Or,
wait
and
a second.
they helped.
Were these houses available, or did you just pick up random houses?
No, we pick out random houses. We weren't serious
even if they weren't available.
Right. No, that wasn't the idea.
I just told my friend who was looking to buy a house and said, only like a house that's actually available to buy.
Well, we weren't there yet. We were just trying to get the possibility of moving into our heads.
I see.
And so by the time we really did find the house that we knew was good for all of us, and the kids helped with that, everybody was on board.
So it's less shocking. You didn't just go by yourself, pick out the other house and say, we're moving here. That's it. Too bad.
And parents can't be afraid. They cannot be afraid if somebody objects. Then you have to sit down and really talk to them.
Be firm,
and firm but loving, and understand that that 7-year-old really has some friends they really don't want to give up. And you have to talk to them. You have to help ease them through it, because it is a big change for kids too. Well, we have to have that love and compassion.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to have empathy as well.
Oh,
right?
Totally.
What is their perspective? What is it that they're seeing, to look through their eyes and their heart, and what fear they're feeling? As a parent, you should be comforting them instead of projecting your own fears.
And one of the
have
worst
to be the brave one, right?
We have to be the brave one, and we have to be the parent.
Yes. That is our job.
It is the parent.
My favorite saying is that once I became a parent, that is the singular most important job I will ever have.
It is. It truly is.
I want to just ask you for a parting comment, because we're really run out of time.
Oh, sure. Yes.
If you could just give one more tip.
Oh, I will.
On how to make kids feel more secure, what would that be?
You know, little notes. And little
like
treats.
The stickies?
Yeah, little stickies. Now, my school, you're able to go inside and stick it on their locker. If you're not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but if you can't, put it in their lunchbox.
And what if they have school lunch?
Well, put it in their coat. Put it on their mittens. Put it somewhere. And just say, honey, I am so proud of you. Just very uplifting. And do it like, don't do it every day, because then it won't be a surprise.
Right, it won't be special.
Yeah.
It removes the special component.
Yes, and they love it if you say, I hope you do really well on that test. And little things like that help the kids say, she's really thinking of me, or he's really thinking of me. It's big, especially when their life is changing.
Excellent. Alena, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy
Remember,
to be here.
if you have children and you're getting divorced, the most important thing is, as much stress and strain and anxiety that you're feeling, help your child see their world through their eyes. Remember to keep the compassion, and that it's so important to them to feel more secure. And you might be crumbling on the inside, but they're suffering as well. Keep your children and what they're feeling close to your heart. Welcome back to Stop My Crisis. I am your host, Vivian Gaspar, and I'm very fortunate to have someone who brings a very unique and a common problem here to your attention. Denise Wennogle is an amazing attorney. She actually talks about something most people have not heard of. When we think of divorce, we think of aggressive behavior, people who hate each other and just can't wait to see what they can get out of the situation and maybe even hurt the person they were supposed to love for who knows how many years. Denise is here to blow that concept out of the water with collaborative divorce. Denise is a family law attorney from Morristown who does practice in New Jersey, and she has discovered collaborative divorce about 10 years ago. She focuses on smart and sensible solutions for families utilizing litigation as a last resort. Thank you so much, Denise. I really appreciate you being here. What you have to say, I think, impacts so many people, but people forget most families have children, and those are the ones who really need to benefit the most from their mom and dad getting along again, even if they need to divorce. Tell me, what did you discover when it came to this relatively unheard of concept called collaborative divorce?
So collaborative divorce is an out-of-court settlement process, very similar to mediation, but without the use of mediators. It's confidential, and it's also non-adversarial, which is beneficial to every family that would go through that.
Tell me about a story that you think that just pops out of your mind that helped people, that was something that they didn't expect, perhaps.
Well, in the collaborative process, sometimes we use child specialists, and we had a couple who were in the process where they couldn't decide where their first grader would start school. And instead of sending them out to a custody evaluation or having a judge make the decision, we sent them to a child specialist who interviewed both parties and the child, with the parties and the child, and then made the decision for the couple.
That is a fantastic strategy instead of the typical adversarial.
Right.
What else are very important key points that you normally tell prospective clients of yours about collaborative law?
Well, it's not for everybody. There needs to be a sense of trust and openness to enter into a collaborative participation agreement. And that's the hallmark of collaborative, is that there's a participation agreement signed by both the parties and their lawyers that really states their commitment to having an amicable process, to following this through in a positive way for their family. If either party decides to leave the process and go the traditional litigation, both parties must obtain new attorneys, because we would have to recuse ourselves.
That's something interesting. I thought you'd just switch a process with the same attorneys. That's really important information.
It's a very important aspect of this, but it's really important because it gives the commitment of the parties right in the beginning. And the participation agreement is very important because there are people out there, other attorneys, that think they're going to do a collaborative case, but then they refuse to sign the participation agreement.
I see.
And that's really key to getting everybody on board and working collaboratively together.
Does collaborative divorce end up usually being a shorter divorce than something that's more adversarial?
It can be. It can be. It depends on how quickly the parties actually resolve all their issues, but we have two attorneys working at the table with them directly, and we're able to give ideas that maybe they hadn't thought of, and the process does seem to go quicker than a normal adversarial process.
I think that is the best takeaway, because people, once they decide they have to divorce, they just want it to be done and over with.
Right. The key here is both parties realizing that they are getting divorced. Like you said, divorce is really difficult. So most of the time that difficulty stems because one party wants a divorce and the other party is not ready for the divorce. So getting them to that point, utilizing the divorce coaches, is a real bonus for the collaborative process.
This, I think, is information that a lot of people have never heard of. Thank you, Denise. This has been very, very valuable.
Thank you.
I appreciate the value in this. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Stop My Crisis. I'm your host, Vivian Gaspar. Let's face it, even though most people, their crisis is related to money, however, I've been hearing from so many people writing into the show that their lives have just become so empty and so lonely that they truly believe their crisis is not being able to find a mate. So sometimes I believe that that could be an entire paradigm shift within themselves. And even though this is something that usually people don't think of a crisis, let's face it, it's easier to make your bills when there's two people. Life is just easier, happier, and more palatable, just better on how to overcome other type of crises when you do it as a team with someone who cares about you and you can care about them. But I know so many people struggling. Let's face it, in the age of the internet, online dating, people are just afraid to approach one another any longer. I have male friends who just don't even know what to do because they're afraid of online dating, and they think that every time they approach a woman, they'll be called a predator. So I want to know, what is the answer nowadays? I brought in a fantastic new guest, Michelle Nagel. Author Michelle Nagel is actually America's #1 resilience expert. And let's face it, after 2 failed marriages, she knows what resilience is. She felt about all the same as a lot of women do, that all good men were taken. I think that's a negative misnomer. And knowing that she had a lot of emotional baggage to deal with, as well as 3 children to raise, she took a sabbatical from relationships altogether. I think a lot of us have done that, and maybe our sabbaticals are getting too long. And she worked on her own emotional health. Happy at last, she finally was fortunate to come and meet her permanent new life partner. Actually hasn't been that new, it's been over 20 years. Michelle, come educate our viewers as to what they could do, because I think so many people are dragged down by this, that it's affected every part of their life, and now they're laden with crises. I meet people like this all the time. Michelle, tell me, how many people are truly single over age 18 in the United States?
In the United States, there are 107 million single people over the age of 18.
Wait a second. I thought our population was 360 million or so in the United States. Maybe 380. So you're saying a third equivalent of the population is single?
Yes.
That sounds quite lonely.
It does sound
lonely,
lonely,
contributing to financial crisis if they're trying to make all their bills by themselves.
I don't know how some people can afford to pay rent without somebody else to help them along.
Especially in some of our more expensive parts of the country, like the parts we're in now. It's really challenging. And so I want to know, what are the reasons, if you find someone you're dating and that perhaps the other party is less interested and willing to commit, because then it's really challenging to make that relationship more permanent. What are some of the reasons someone's afraid to commit?
Many times people don't want to make a commitment because perhaps they come from a divorce home. If their parents divorced or were never married, then they see how much struggle that their parent went through, and they don't want to repeat that. They don't want to take the risk of having another generation have to go through what they had to go through. And so another reason also that they find that they're really reluctant to make that commitment is perhaps they are somebody who wants to play the field. And if you don't have that understanding between each other, I had a friend recently who just said that the guy she thought was her one and only was dating multiple women all at the same time because they'd never had that conversation.
But wouldn't you notice if the person you're really interested in was dating many other people, or even 1 or 2 other people, if they're not emotionally or physically available to you a lot?
You would think so. This was a long distance relationship. They lived in 2 separate cities, and so she didn't see him all the time, so she didn't know what he was doing. But he wanted to have, all the benefits, of course.
Of course!
But he didn't want to make that commitment. So if a person has already had a failed relationship, they've already been through all the pain and anguish of perhaps a divorce, they don't want to go through that again.
That's very understandable. Can you just give us 5 tips for someone to find Mr. or Miss Right?
The first thing that you should do in order to find Mr. or Miss Right is to be Mr. or Miss Right.
Fix ourselves first,
Yes.
so we're attractive for the other person.
Well, it's interesting because you will find that you will attract a different flavor of person when you've got your own stuff together. It was when I reduced all of my baggage, and I had a lot, that I ran into my husband, and I was even upset because it's like, my life, I like my life. You're inconvenient. So,
did he have to convince you?
He did. He had to work a little hard to convince me that he was not that inconvenient. So, but the most important thing that you can do, in addition to clearing out your own baggage, is to accept 100% responsibility for your life. That means you stop blaming and complaining and, oh, I'm single. You know, nobody wants to listen to you whining.
Right.
Just stop doing that and say, from this moment on, I'm going to accept 100% responsibility for my life, and I'm going to be responsible for my own happiness. It does not hinge upon Mr. or Miss Right.
Accept yourself completely.
Yes.
Is there any last tips you can get? Because so many people I know are in this predicament. They can't, especially, how about for single parents? I know I just have a new person that I'm working with that I just met recently, a single dad of kids, and he's completely fed up, but yet his life would be made easier with a partner, and he knows it, but he's like, I want nothing to do with it. And he's actually someone who was actually introduced to me by a business partner, and it's become more and more rampant, I think. You know, he actually drives a car service for a living, and he says, oh, I don't have time, but yet I want to make the time. And he seems a little conflicted. Anything that's a particularly good tip for a single parent?
Don't give up. That's probably the most important thing.
I think, wait a second, aren't you a resilience expert? I think that ties in somewhere.
So, yes, so find somebody. If you find that, look back at your life. If you've got all that baggage, then hire an expert that can help you clear out the baggage so that you become the person that you want to marry, somebody like you. So make a list of the most important things, the absolute must-haves that you will not take any kind of compromise on. I must have this in a partner. And then make a list of the, I would like to have this. Those you can fudge on. Don't fudge on the must-haves, because you cannot change anybody else. You can only change yourself.
People need to remember that more. Michelle, thank you so much for this great information. And remember, life is easier with a partner. Don't just be satisfied, because if you're struggling in any aspect of your life, think about that. You might be fed up, but don't give up hope. And remember, the better person you are, especially on the inside, the more attractive you are to someone else. It's not just about your looks, because however old you are now, looks can always fade. A car accident can happen. You turn 20 years older. It's what's inside that someone's really going to care about. That's all for now. Remember, that will stop your crisis.